The man speaking is not a diplomat. He is a handler, cloaked in the anonymity of intelligence, bureaucracy, and he is deeply uncomfortable. He is outlining a plan to transfer critical strategic funding, millions of dollars earmarked for combating Soviet's influence in the Horn of Africa to a third-party intermediary, a shell company registered in Panama, ostensibly for infrastructure stabilization. But the purpose was anything but stabilization. That money drawn from the deepest pockets of Western intelligence was about to finance the largest, most audacious non-military operation ever conceived by the Mossad, the rescue of thousands of persecuted souls trapped in the desolate heart of a communist nightmare, walking hundreds of miles across hostile desert into the nation of Sudan, Israel's most bitter enemy. They would use the CIA's budget not to arm rebels, but to charter airliners, bribe border guards, and maintain a sprawling, unbelievable front operation on the Red Sea coast. It was a gamble built on staggering risk, moral ambiguity, and the willingness to let the world believe that certain parts of the Israeli intelligence machine were more interested in diving tourists than in saving lives. If they succeeded, it would be a miracle. If they failed, it would be an international catastrophe, the complete annihilation of a community, and the death sentence for every agent involved. To understand the sheer, terrifying audacity of that lethal web of espionage, desperation, and salvation that became Operation Moses Way must first return to the relentless, dry heat of 1980. In the ancient highlands of Ethiopia, a centuries-old community known as Beta Israelda, House of Israel, faced extinction. They had endured centuries of isolation, but the rise of the Marxist dictator Mengistu Haile Mariam, backed by the Soviet Union, turned their lives into a slow, grinding terror. Famine swept the land, fueled by war and disastrous agricultural policies. The choice was simple: stay and starve or flee into the void. Their historical homeland, Jerusalem, felt impossibly distant. By 1980, reports reaching Tel Aviv were desperate. Thousands of Ethiopian Jews were making the brutal 500-mile walk east, crossing mountains and arid plains, heading toward a single, dangerous refugee camps in neighboring Sudan. Sudan was a viper's nest, ruled by President Jofer Naimeri. It was a militant Muslim nation, vehemently hostile to the very existence of Israel. Any Israeli operative caught on Sudanese soil faced immediate execution, yet it was the only possible escape route. The problem wasn't merely danger, it was logistics, and above all, money. Transporting thousands of people out of Sudan required charter aircraft, diplomatic silence, massive intelligence operations, and the constant greasing of local palmzol conducted within the operational budget of a covert agency in a politically toxic environment. Shlomo, the station chief assigned the unprecedented task, understood the conundrum. "We cannot use Israeli money openly," he stated in a cramped, unlit meeting room in Herzliya. "Every transfer is traceable. We cannot ask the Americans directly for rescue funds. They have their own game, here the Cold War. We need a shadow." The Mossad devised the perfect, ridiculous shadow: a luxury diving resort on the Sudanese coast, near Port Sudan. A massive section of the CIA's regional stabilization funds was filtered through a complex chain of front corporations managed by the Mossad. This money, intended to secure Western interests against Soviet now funded the purchase of an abandoned, run-down Italian tourist resort on the Arouse Peninsula. The official name was Arouse on the Red Sea. Its function was to house unsuspecting European tourists. Its real purpose was to serve as a high-security communications hub, a supply line, and a launch pad for human extraction. It was the only place in the world where scuba divers seeking coral reefs shared the same beachfront as Israeli intelligence agents running a desperate humanitarian black ops mission. This arrangement, where the Mossad used American strategic funds to conduct a purely national interest operation, was the first brilliant deception. It allowed them to operate with a financial firewall the size of the US Treasury, masking the operational cost under the guise of regional stability initiatives that satisfied the necessary accounting audits. The team deployed to Arouse arrived under the cover of European travel agents and resort managers. Their mission: run a successful, high-end resort during the day and conduct mass infiltration extraction at night. It sounded like a spy novel parody, but the alternative was unthinkable. The first weeks at Arouse were a slow, excruciating climb of tension. The agents, led by a man named Danny, focused on the mundane details that kept their cover airtight. They stocked the bar with expensive scotch, hired local staff, mostly big, whose loyalty could be bought but never guaranteed, and fixed the sputtering diesel generator. They had to be perfect hosts. The slightest slip, and cerveza, warm beer. A missed reservation could draw unwanted scrutiny from the Sudanese government officials, who occasionally visited to assure themselves the strange Europeans were paying their taxes. "We are running a 5-star operation where the clientele are the biggest security risk," Danny reported back, the static of the encrypted line barely covering the sound of European dance music filtering through the thin walls of his office. The daily routine was torture. Mossad agents, elite specialists, trained for violent combat and high-level surveillance, spent their mornings listening to complaints about water temperature and ensuring the underwater visibility was perfect for the German tourists. But the real work began when the sun dropped below the horizon. Under the cloak of darkness, the sophisticated communications equipment, hidden beneath the resort's laundry facility, sprang to life. The communications were not with tour operators. They were with Mossad assets, deep inside the Ethiopian refugee camps, coordinating the next movement of the weary travelers. The Beta Israel, having survived the grueling walk across the treacherous Ethiopian-Sudanese border, were congregating in the vast, disease-ridden camps near Gad. The logistics of moving thousands of people out of these camps without attracting the attention of Sudanese patrols, the KGB agents operating in the region, or the international aid agencies were nightmarish. Denny's team divised la route, a clandestine 10-hour drive from the camps, cutting across desolate desert tracks, all the way to the coast near Arouse. The challenge wasn't just the distance, it was the timing. The convoys had to move simultaneously, undetected, and arrive at designated coastal pickup spots with military precision. And the drivers, they were driving rented, beat-up transport trucks that looked like they belonged to local merchants, piled high with human cargo. The first extraction attempt was set for a moonless night in late 1981. 2 trucks carrying 80 people were scheduled to arrive at 2 a.m. Danny was waiting on a rocky beach, the humid air thick with salt and anxiety. The only sounds were the soft, rhythmic lapping of the Red Sea and the incessant buzzing of desert insects. He strained his ears for the sound of the truck engines, but heard only silence. 1 hour passed, then 2. The risk escalated exponentially with every minute they waited. The Sudanese patrols were sparse, but aggressive. Daylight was only hours away, and discovery would mean execution for everyone. At 4:15 a.m., just as panic started to seize the team, a single, weak headlight appeared far inland. It wasn't the sound of a roaring diesel engine. It was the soft, persistent sound of a truck grinding gears. When the vehicle finally reached the beach, the driver, an exhausted agent named Eaton, spat dust. "Ambush," he whispered, his voice raw. "Bandits hit the road 50 miles back. We lost the second truck, had to ditch the plant route and circle back 3 hours." I didn't explain that the bandits weren't interested in the people, only the vehicles. They had fought them off. But the delay was catastrophic. They had 80 lives here, huddled on the beach, but 80 more were now scattered and vulnerable, abandoned in the desert far from the extraction point, possibly running straight into a Sudanese patrol. The carefully planned CI-funded operation was collapsing on the most fundamental level. The journey itself, they had secured the endpoint, but the path was a slaughterhouse. The realization hit hard. The logistics of the desert trek were far more dangerous than the extraction itself. They were fighting famine, bandits, and fatigue before they even started fighting the Sudanese authorities. The operation needed a fundamental shift in strategy. The Mossad shifted focus, leveraging the same funds that maintained the resort to radically increase their network of contacts and intelligence gathering inside the camps. They needed perfect intel on patrol routes, and they needed to neutralize the bandit threat. They achieved this using the very money designated for stability. Large sums were discreetly paid to local tribal leaders, ostensibly as consultation fees for the resort's in turn, guaranteed safe passage through their territory and actively suppressed bandit activity along the newly established convoy routes. It was peace bought by the US taxpayer, executed by Israeli intelligence. The new route was longer, but safer, and the movement of people became a silent river, flowing weekly from the camps to the coastal rendezvous spots, often several hours' drive from the Arouse resort. The resort, meanwhile, continued to flourish. Tourists complained about the heat, delighted in the snorkeling, and never suspected that the maintenance dinghies they watched putter across the calm water late at night were actually shuttling agents and essential supplies to meet a hidden convoy. One quiet Tuesday afternoon, the sense of security shattered. Sudanese General Ibrahim, the regional military commander, returned. Suspicious man who viewed the resort's Western management with profound distrust. He brought 3 armed guards. Danny, smiling broadly, ushered the general to the best table overlooking the turquoise water, ordering the kitchen staff, all Mossad agents, to serve their finest imported champagne. General Ibrahim didn't look at the menu. He looked at Danny's hands, then his eyes. "Mr. David," he began, using Danny's cover name, "I find this place curious. It is a beautiful paradise, but it is very far from everywhere. And your staff, they are very efficient for Europeans who only know how to serve wine." The air went dead calm. The sound of the small waves breaking on the sand seemed deafening. Danny felt the familiar, metallic taste of adrenaline rising in his throat. "We invest heavily in training, General," Danny replied smoothly, placing his hands flat on the table, careful not to signal the two agents in the kitchen who were ready to move. "Sudan is a new market. We must be excellent to survive." Ibrahim leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low, chilling register. "The efficiency I see, it is military efficiency. Tell me, Mr. David, why do you have so much high-powered radio equipment concealed near your laundry facility? Are you reporting on my patrols?" This was not a fishing expedition. This was knowledge. Danny did not flinch. He let a small, genuine laugh escape. "General, that is the curse of modern tourism. We are running a massive international reservation system, and the satellite bandwidth here is terrible. We had to invest in powerful signal boosters just so Mrs. Steiner in Germany can book her dive package." He gestured toward the resort office. "Come, let me show you the cost of modern connectivity." He successfully diverted the general toward the fake communications hub, showing off dummy equipment and printed brochures. But the moment was burned into the operation's history. They were exposed. General Ibrahim's suspicions were confirmed, even if he lacked the proof. They were living on borrowed time. The ground operation had to accelerate drastically. The Mossad realized that the convoys were too slow, too vulnerable, and too dependent on shaky local agreements. They needed a mass exodus. True airlift to capitalize on the financial and political cover they had established with the CIA's passive assistance. The decision was made to execute Operation Moses. The air evacuation, this required coordinating a massive logistical effort with the Israeli Air Force IAF, flying heavy transport planes. Hercules C-130s directly into Sudan, landing on remote unlit airstrips, loading hundreds of people and taking off all within a window of under 45 minutes, hundreds of miles from any friendly territory. The political situation was deteriorating. President Naimeri of Sudan was under increasing pressure from Arab states regarding the mysterious movements on his coast. In December 1984, the operation commenced. The first flight landed in the darkest hour before dawn. The airstrip was nothing more than a strip of packed sand, marked by flares held by Mossad agents. As the giant Hercules E's, engines still roaring, settled onto the ground, the trucks burst from the surrounding darkness. The sight was overwhelming. Hundreds of weary, silent people, carrying nothing but their children and their hope, surging toward the open belly of the plane. Suddenly, disaster struck. The ground team had been too focused on the refugees. An engine, straining under the intense heat and dust, sputtered violently and tendied. The plane was stranded. The pilot, a seasoned IAF veteran, screamed into the comms, "We're dead in the water. We can't cycle the second engine." Panic erupted on the ground. They had minutes before the roar of the massive plane drew attention. If Sudanese military intelligence found the crippled Israeli military transport on their soil, the repercussions would be devastating. Danny, still utilizing the humanitarian aid guise that had been their saving grace, took charge. He shouted at the remaining agents to mobilize the transport trucks not to evacuate the people, but to mask the plane. The trucks were driven directly in front of and behind the Hercules, their headlights blazing and their heavy exhaust plumes mixing with the dust. It looked like a chaotic, disorganized transport depot, not a disabled military aircraft. Then, Danny took the ultimate risk. He drove his own Jeep straight toward the disabled engine, grabbed the fire extinguisher, and began spraying the cooling unit. The agent serving as the flight engineer, seeing the improvised cooling, realized the issue. The intense heat soak in the sand was preventing the cycle. With seconds to spare, the engine sputtered, coughed, and roared back to life. The remaining refugees were piled on. The ramp slammed shut, and the Hercules surged down the crude runway, lifting off in a cloud of sand and exhaust. Just as the first faint hint of blue light appeared on the eastern horizon, they had averted failure through sheer improvisation, but they were not yet safe. The final flights of Operation Moses were conducted under a cloud of international suspicion. News of the mysterious mass airlifts had leaked to the press, and Sudan was forced to acknowledge the presence of the refugees The danger was no longer discovery on the ground, but interception in the air. On the last scheduled flight, a massive Boeing chartered through a European shell company again, funded indirectly by the flow of American strategic funds, was loaded with the final wave. As the massive jet climbed to cruising altitude over the Red Sea, heading east toward Europe, a necessary stop to mask its true destination. Israel, the radio crackled with static. Flight 407. This is Khartoum Air Control. You are deviating from authorized flight path. Return immediately to Port Sudan or face interception. The Sudanese government, realizing the extent of the deception, had chosen the final, desperate moment to stop the operation and claim the passengers as political hostages. The pilot, a former commercial flyer recruited for this specific task, looked at the load: manifest 300 men, women, and children who had walked through hell to reach this point. He looked at the Mossad agents sitting silently in the cockpit jump seat. The agent gave a barely perceptible shake of the head. Asterisk, do not return. Asterisk, Khartoum control. This is Flight 407. We are experiencing communications failure. Say again. The pilot deliberately modulated his voice to sound weak and distorted. Khartoum repeated the threat, now laced with genuine anger. The pilot made his decision. He flipped a series of switches, cutting all external communication and diverting sharply east, pushing the plane to its maximum speed. He knew that the Sudanese Air Force had aging Soviet-era MiGs. If they were scrambled now, they might catch them. For 20 minutes, the silence in the cockpit was absolute, broken only by the hum of the engines and the distant, fearful murmur of the passengers. They were flying blind, uncommunicative, outrunning potential hostile engagement over open water. Every flash of light on the horizon looked like an incoming missile. It was pure, sustained terror, the feeling that salvation could be snatched away at the last second by a single, desperate decision from a government eager to save face. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the jet crossed the invisible border into friendly airspace. The tension snapped, replaced by an overwhelming, silent exhaustion. The mission was technically complete, but the repercussions were immediate. The leaks forced Israel to hold the operation prematurely. Thousands of Beta Israel were left stranded in the Sudanese camps, victims of the sudden international exposure. The rescue operation had saved 8,000 lives, but it had left 15,000 behind. The Mossad immediately disbanded the aroused resort. They simply packed up, leaving the keys with a terrified local employee, vanishing overnight as if the resort had never been there. The diving resort Arouse sat empty, a monument to a perfect, ridiculous deception. The Mossad team returned to Israel, not to celebration, but to a silent, haunted debriefing. They had succeeded against impossible odds, saving thousands, but the residual shame of those left behind hung heavy in the air. The financial accounting of Operation Moses revealed the genius of the deception. The resort had run at a slight loss as a tourist attraction, but the operational cost of the charters, the convoys, the bribes, the sophisticated communications had been almost entirely buried under the opaque banner of CIA-backed regional aid programs. In effect, the American government, intent on checking the USSR's influence in the region, had unwittingly underwritten one of Israel's most successful humanitarian intelligence missions. The intelligence success wasn't measured in captured documents or neutralized threats, but in lives delivered. It proved that deep cover assets, if properly funded and supported, could move mountains or, in this case, thousands of people across deserts. The political fallout was immense. The operation confirmed to the world the desperate plight of the Ethiopian Jews, forcing governments into action. The work started by Operation Moses paved the way for subsequent, more massive airlifts. Operation Joshua and, eventually, the breathtakingly large Operation Salamina 90, which airlifted 14,325 people in a single 36-hour period. The story of the Arouse Resort, the fake tourist haven run by spies, became a legend in the espionage world and almost comical cover that worked because of its sheer absurdity. It demonstrated the core philosophy of the Mossad in its most powerful humanitarian light, that if the mission is vital, the rules are secondary, and every resource, even those supplied by a passive, unwitting ally, must be lit. The final legacy of the operation wasn't just the establishment of the Ethiopian Jewish community in Israel, but the quiet confirmation of a principle. When intelligence meets desperation, the line between espionage and salvation vanishes. The ultimate goal is simply to survive long enough to witness the dawn.